I think what helped me to succeed really well is I was very diligent with my study notes and essay scaffold, so that was really important to me, and that's a skill I try and teach my students to have as well.
Right, awesome. Well, why don't you just start by introducing yourself?
Well, I'm Lily. I've been at Ignite for since April. I'm predominantly an English student, but I also do modern history or business studies. I'm currently at university also studying a Bachelor of Arts in English, majoring in English and history with the intention of doing it with education next year.
Amazing. Okay, great. And so tell me what you were like as a student.
I was a fairly diligent student, probably because I got really stressed out if I procrastinated. So yeah, I was pretty good. I was an A student. Towards the end of the HSC, I think what helped me to succeed really well is I was very diligent with my study notes and essay scaffold. So that was really important to me, and that's a skill I try and teach my students to have as well. But yeah, I was a fairly good student, I would say.
Okay, great. And so what had you want to become a tutor? Like, why did you, apply for that?
Well, I want to go into education, so I thought it would be valuable experience first of all. But also, I have done tutoring on and off since I was in about year 9. So I've always found it really rewarding and valuable to see that you're making a real impact on students' lives. And every student's different, and I just thought it's a really incredible job that you see a reward in every single day.
Amazing. And what is it particularly like? Can you tell me a moment where you found it rewarding with a student?
Yeah, absolutely. I always think probably the most rewarding moment of students is after like the first lesson when they first come to you and they seem a bit nervous or a bit hesitant and maybe a little bit scared. But then if like there's always a moment like in like the second lesson or where you might get them to smile and ease up a little bit and you see them like become more confident, feel like they can ask more questions. And to me, that's the real reward where you've kind of felt like you've won the students like support, or they feel really comfortable with you. I feel like that's the most important moment. Yeah.
Absolutely. And this may tie into that, but what sort of things do you do to build rapport with your students, especially when they first start?
Yeah. I think a sense of humor is probably the most important thing. If you're willing to laugh at the text or what they're doing, or even laugh at yourself if you make a mistake, I think it puts the student really at ease to go, okay, this isn't super serious. They're nice. They're on their side. It just immediately creates a good rapport and atmosphere with them.
That is such a good one. Absolutely. I always love being in a spot where I kind of get to tease students a little bit, especially if they've been like, I had this one student where, he's like, oh no, I'm terrible at poetry. And his dad was like, oh, he's terrible. I'm terrible at poetry. He's terrible at poetry. And I'm like, I wonder where that came from. It's funny because once we actually started getting into it and he was writing about it, I was like, oh, well, looks like, someone's good at poetry. I'm going to take dad. And he's like, and he was kind of ha shy about it, but like he loved it.
Exactly. But yeah, it's good when you're able to laugh about that with them. And yeah, I think it just creates a good relationship there. And then it like puts them more at ease that they're able to ask questions later on and know that they're not going to be judged for anything if they get something wrong or whatever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And I think having a great personality and a beautiful smile, and you just have great energy. So I can see why you love you. Cool. So yeah, we covered quite a lot actually, but what do you do to prepare your students for assessments? Obviously you start off with them, you're building that rapport, you're having them feel comfortable to ask questions and not feel like, they're going to look stupid if they get something wrong. But then what do you do down to kind of getting the result, I suppose? What do you do there to prepare them?
Absolutely. So we track ahead for the term. So we always find out what a student's doing, when their assessment's going to be, and we plan towards that. So that will start with making sure that they're really comfortable with the content. That for me is often a lot of paragraph writing and a lot of like analysis and building like quote tables and study notes. And then when it's about 4 weeks probably, or maybe even before, as soon as possible, we start working on essay scaffolds. So there's a structure that they know that they're working towards. And then we start getting them to actually start writing an essay or whatever the assessment task is. So that then there's plenty of time in advance for polishing that task, getting it checked with teachers for feedback, as well as yourself we send it to, so that there's a lot of eyes on it, so that we make sure that they're handing in the best possible version of their task that they can.
Awesome. And you know, you graduated last year and obviously did very well. And you know, you're sort of using those skills to prepare your students now. What do you like, what's your take on how much you can like memorize a response, or you know, like how do you take what you've learned and then do it under exam conditions?
Absolutely. So in the new syllabus in particular, it is probably wrong to say that you can memorize an entire response, because the questions are a lot more designed now for flexible thinking and for students to have to think on their feet in the exam.
Yeah.
So I think that there's definitely something to be said for having an essay scaffold that you have tried and tested with a bunch of different essay questions, as well as knowing your content and your quotes and memorizing those. However, on top of that, what I like to do with my students is to have the content that we've done and put them under like drills where I get them to do like 10-minute planning for different essay questions. So I'm like, okay, so now write the thesis that you're going to do, twist your thesis that we're doing to answer this question, and now write out 3 of your topic sentences. So it just gets them used to the exam like planning, so that when they get in there and they have a question that they've never faced before, they know how to do that and they've got the skills to do that and they've done it before, so they have some confidence. So yeah.
Yes, I love that. And then when you're getting them to, you know, write out their thesis, what do you actually like, how do they get their head around those tricky questions?
So I always go, you have to look at the keywords in the question and create synonyms for them. And what I always say is, if you know the themes of the book really well, though, that question is always in some way going to allude to the themes that you know. So if you can have like a thesaurus in your head of like, okay, so like, you know, what's an example? I don't know, power can also be authority or leadership or judgment. So if you have these list of words and realize that they're synonyms, then when they twist their thesis, they're more confident to be able to go, okay, well, I have talked about this, might not be the exact wording, but I know the idea. So then when they're using the thesis, they've got the similar ideas. It's just using those keywords in the question.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that, you know, what you're pointing to is like, what are the aspects of the human condition or the human experience? Like, regardless of whether you're doing, you know, common module text and human experiences, the whole syllabus is based on the human experience. So that's why we always look at that, you know, the power, the authority, conflict, you know, meaning of existence, you know, good versus evil, you know, all those things that really relate to all of us. So if you really understand what those key ideas of human experience are in the text that you've done, and that's the structure of your, you know, the essay or the scaffold or whatever that you have, then you should be able to answer any question, because they can't ask you about something that the text isn't about, right? Like it's always, it's just going to be in a different word. And it's going to use phrases from the syllabus. So it's really, I love what you said about, breaking down the question, doing the top. Why would you get students to do those topic sentences? Are you saying do that before you start the introduction?
Yes, I definitely say do it before you start the introduction, because you have to know where you're going with that essay. So students will often have done 3 paragraphs or have an essay structure before. However, then when they get into the exam, I find they often panic and go, I have to write all new paragraphs. Nothing's going to work. So I say, write your topic sentences first so that you realize your paragraphs are going to work. And then you can write a really clear introduction, because you've got your thesis there, you've got your 3 points, you know what you're working towards, and it's just writing from there. And you have the clear plan that you can refer back to. So even if like they're at their 3rd paragraph, they've written so much, they're panicking, they can't remember what they're supposed to write, they've got it written down right there. So they're like, okay, I know how to approach this.
Yes.
All good.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that, because I think can be a lot of mystery around English and what to do. So rather than feeling like, oh, well, I'll just have to kind of learn whatever and then hopefully it all works out when I get in the exam, like you just can't leave it up to that chance. You've got to like do those questions in that time before you get in there, so you just get really comfortable. And I think it's great to have that like step-by-step thing of the underlying the keywords, the synonyms, do your topic sentences, then do your introduction, because that's a clear plan. You know?
Yeah.
I always say to students, like, every time, it's funny, they don't do the planning when the question is the hardest. And actually, sometimes when it's the easiest, they don't do the planning as well. It's like, oh, I've already answered it, but then they miss like keywords that they could be using to show that they've like really adapted their answer to this question. They're writing to this question, not like some prepared thing. So it's either the really easy ones or the really hard ones that will kind of catch students out. I think if you just use that formula every single time, regardless of how easy or how difficult it looks, you can break it down and then really like get the most out of it.
Definitely, I think so too. And the more they do it, the quicker it becomes for them. So they realize that they're not wasting time in the exam. Like a couple of my students are a bit like, I'm going to waste like 10 minutes. I'm like, no, like I'm going to prove to you did this in 5 minutes. Like, and everyone has to take time to plan. So
yeah, because you have all this information in your head, right? So you just want to like start writing, so you get through it. But it's actually better to write a shorter answer that really answers the question well. I've even told people, if you even need to take out a whole paragraph, but you nail that question, you will get a higher mark at the end of the day. So
absolutely. Yeah. It's all about quality, not quantity.
Yes. Love it. Amazing. Cool. So what do you think one of the biggest challenges is right now? Like, we're kind of in a tricky time with lockdowns and homeschools, and, what do you think is one of the biggest challenges students are facing at the moment?
I think that talking to particularly probably my year 11 students, and actually, it probably applies through them all. They're not seeing their friends as much. So when they're about to go into a really stressful situation, they don't have that camaraderie. They don't have everyone around them to talk about different ideas for study, to talk about how they're all stressed about it. And even in a classroom setting, they don't have like the freedom as much to ask questions. So I think as a result, their anxiety just goes so high. And because we don't have much else going on at the moment as well, they're really focused on it. So I think it's just making it incredibly more stressful. A lot of them feel a bit underprepared because they're not in like the structured setting of school, and they don't have their peers around them to motivate them as much. A lot of them are like losing control over their study patterns and developing worse procrastination habits. So I think it's just created a really difficult environment for them where they've lost a lot of the support and routine that is so crucial as well. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Because how routine, like school is so routine. Like bells on the exact, it's that bell times at like, 57 past the hour, it's so specific.
Yeah.
So how do you, what advice would you give students dealing with that, or what do you do with your students?
Well, I think that the best thing that we can do is to know that, like, I tell my students that I'm always a safe place that they can come to talk about their anxieties. But I think the best thing is that giving them the roadmap of how to approach the exam, having the clear study techniques, and also giving them like a list of like study strategies, for example, like writing under time conditions or memorizing quotes in a certain way or whatever, makes them feel a little bit more prepared. It gives them that structure that they've been missing. So so just going through and making sure that they know that they are prepared, that they are supported, that there are other people like who have seen it all, like they're not on their own, even if they're not with their peers all the time, feeling that kind of camaraderie. Everyone is going through the same thing, and having that third person to just talk to and go and help them calm their anxieties just a little bit and feel more prepared.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, being able to, have that support is amazing. And also, and you did the HSC and you had a lockdown. I mean, this all started when you were doing the HSC. We knew so much less about it. So like as a student, how did you feel last year? How did you get through that?
Yeah, it was incredibly difficult at the start because we were in lockdown from in term 1, I think, all of term 1.
In the term 1, yeah.
So definitely it was really difficult. I know a lot of us lost motivation, and we definitely weren't covering the content as well in classes, and our teachers were very unsure of how to approach things, what things that they were going to try and save until we were out of lockdown. It was very chaotic and all over the place. However, what I do feel for these kids this year is that we got out of it. And then we came back to school, and yes, we were making up time for them, but then we got our structure back. But these kids, it's happened right at the end of the year for them, So I can't imagine what they're going through. But in a way, we did go through it very similar and we did survive. So that's kind of my mantra, is that no matter what, like, we found out that death, taxes, and HSC happen no matter what. So you'll get through in whatever form it takes place. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, that's so good. And I think one of the things that are probably hard to see now, but there's such an ability there's such a versatility now. You've gone through that, you've come out the other side, you're clearly flourishing. And that's, I suppose, we're going to all have these challenges, right? So how do you, and it all comes down to that, like, how do you adapt to that? How do you be versatile? And it's awesome to hear your story and how you ended up being so successful last year, and you've gone on to do something you're really passionate about, even though it was such a turbulent time. We're going to be studying this era for like history. COVID era, like the Cold War era, the COVID era.
Yes, absolutely, definitely. But yeah, I think it's definitely teaches you resilience, and you realize that even if you feel like you're completely disadvantaged, everyone's disadvantaged. So keeping that in perspective is really important, I think, as well.
That is so well said, because I've been teaching for 18 years, and every single year, everyone's like, oh, this year's going to be the hardest. Oh, this year they're going to make the exam really hard. I don't know why we have this attitude that for some reason, like, we're the year that's going to get screwed. You know what I mean? I kid you not, 18 years every year. And I tell that same story every year. And I always felt bad, because I'm like, oh, geez, maybe this is really the year, But actually, it just reminded me, I say that to everyone, It's kind of, for me, it's kind of like the heat wave that happens in September. It's almost like this surprise every time, it comes, but it happens every year. And this is a perspective everyone has. So, I just think regardless of the year you're in, year 12 is tough. It's I'm 37 now, and I still feel like it was the hardest year of my life.
Yeah, it's definitely challenging, 100%.
Yeah,
challenging for everyone, which
exactly.
Yeah.
That's it. So, the more you can keep that positivity, and like, if you can this year, like, bring structure. And I think that's an amazing skill to have just for your life, because once you finish school, like, there isn't that same structure. And I think a lot of people struggle when they go to university, because unis don't care if you don't turn up. They'll just be like, well, you're out, like, they're not going to chase you down. They're not going to do a roll call and see where else. Sometimes they might do a roll call for tutes, but no one's going to be chasing you if you're not there. They're not going to be calling your parents or sending a note home or anything like that, So maybe we may actually be in a situation where people are more prepared for what comes after school than ever before, because, people have had to make those adjustments from all the years down of having to, get that work done and create that structure for themselves, And I think one of the things I've seen works really well is if you can, schedule times to do work rather than going, because I think when you have the whole day to do work, you could just spread it all out, and then you've just kind of not really gotten through that much, and you haven't really relaxed either. So, it's like, pick your work times, like 9 till 12, or even the normal time of school time, but then just do nothing after, or whatever it is, like, just get your priorities happening, get them scheduled, and then go do something else. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that in a way, yeah, you're very right. These kids will come out of it with different skills that even I, to a lesser extent, didn't have, like those ability to structure, that are definitely more relevant to life than like HSCs in a way. But yeah,
that might be the silver lining at the end of the day.
Definitely true. Yeah, lots of resilience happening.
So if there was one piece of advice you could give to HSC students, what would it be?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I was going, like, obviously that we've all gone through it and survived thing, but in a more practical way, I think the biggest piece of advice I could say is be working on your study notes from the start of the year and constantly be revising, editing, condensing them down. Like, because then when you get to the HSC, so many kids are like, I've got to make all my study notes. I've got to be studying the content. And like, and then when in reality, in that month before the HSC, in between trials or whatever, you should be applying the feedback from trials and be doing practice exams and under time conditions to get good at the actual exam structure and all of that, not learning content. So yeah, that would be the biggest piece of advice I could say, is get yourself prepared so you're in a really good place when it comes to the HSC. And in a way, it also cut down your study time. Like, you won't be spending as much time, like 24 hours a day as you think that you will. You'll just be doing even just a couple of hours a day, just doing practice exams instead of like trying to compile all your notes and everything.
That's it, absolutely. And I think that's actually a lot healthier.
Yeah, definitely.
I just remember cramming and doing so many hours and having to be like, oh, I've got to get outside and do some exercise or something. But really, I wasn't, because I just constantly felt guilty about how I needed to be studying all the time. But just in hindsight, that was probably counterproductive.
I have so many students. I had a student come to me recently who's in year 11, and her mum was on the phone. She's like, she thinks she's supposed to be doing 6 hours a day because that's what she's been told. And as a result, she's doing nothing because she's just completely overwhelmed. And so the first thing I said to her was, you do not have to do 6 hours a day. You're going to be okay.
Yeah. That's a funny question. I mean, I've often had parents say, like, how much study should, my child be doing I'm like, it's not about time.
No,
it's just not about time. Like, there are tasks to complete. If you complete them and you're efficient with that, then go do something else. It's about it's kind of that quality quantity conversation, right? Like, what's the quality of the work you're doing rather than the quantity of time you're sitting there, and 6 hours is so arbitrary.
Yeah, that's what I think. But I don't know. I think it also depends for every student. I was the kind of student who couldn't do that much study. So I had all my study notes done and then just only did a couple of hours, did a lot less study than what my students were doing, than what my peers were doing, but was just doing practice essays and everything. However, I did have other friends who were like, no, I need to have this designated 3 to 4 hours a day. And they did end up doing well. But it just depends on whatever you feel prepared with as a student, and you know yourself and your study as well, because everyone's different.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that, because it's not the same for everybody, and we try to go, oh, well, that person did well, let me just kind of copy that. But that's not necessarily the thing that works for you. Right. You won't teach all your students exactly the same way, will you?
No, that's so true. Every student, you feel like, I always go in with a lesson plan, and particularly if they're a new student, I'm like, oh, this will work because my other year 7 students doing this. And then you go and you're like, oh my gosh, completely different boat, completely different student responding to it in a completely different way. And this one learns like this and this learns like that. And it's challenging, but that's, I think, is what makes it most rewarding, because you're doing something different every single day. Yeah,
that's so true. I never thought of it like that, but yeah, absolutely. It makes it a lot more interesting.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just kind of becoming a bit of a broken record.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, hey, look, thank you so much for chatting to me, and I just think there's some amazing advice that you've got in there for students and what they're dealing with. And it's been amazing to see your development as a tutor, and someone that can really share your experience and contribute back to the students that you're now working with in such a practical and positive and encouraging way. So yeah, amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I really enjoy working at Ignite. It's just been amazing, and yeah, so much positivity in this company from top to bottom. Thanks.